Ever since March 19th, when I uploaded the world's first one-shot challenge, I wondered, is it possible to one-shot everything in Elden Ring at level 1 without putting a single point into stats? Let's go find out. This is the story of the quest to become the world's first ever Elden Ring level 1 shot.
You can't defeat me.
No, I know. But he can.
The ground rules are fairly straightforward. We're going to start as a level on WRETCH and we're not allowed to level at all. Everything we need in the game we can only obtain if we one-shot whoever's guarding it. Now boss fights with multiple opponents, you're allowed to, but don't necessarily need to hit each one once. Now even if something hits multiple times, such as Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, it still counts as long as it's one button press. Basically just not things you hold the button down like Comet Azure. As usual, I want to shout out Vegeta311 for coming up with these rules over a decade ago. So let's dive on in and embrace the suck. We'll start off making a WRETCH and taking the Stone Sword Key. While not an exact specific order, this is the target map of the bosses that we're going to kill during this run. All of them either award us something important we need for the run or block progress to the Elden Beast. Our first target is the Crystallian. Our objective here is obtaining the Smithing Stone Miner's Bell Bearing 1. This boss has around 1700 HP, and their main weakness is Strike. They have a 90% damage negation for all types of damage except strike damage, so we're going to one-shot them with some curved great clubs. Now being our first boss, there's a little more prep involved in this one. We're going to start off in Limgrave grabbing our flask, and the Strength Knot tier for it for 10 additional strength. Then we're going to grab the Golden Battle Ash of War and throw it on a dagger for an additional 12% damage buff. At this point we need to head over to Caelid before the festival begins to grab the Red Hot Wet Blade for early access to fire affinities, and the Radagon Sword Seal Talisman for basically 20 levels worth of stat points. Then we're going to head down to the Merchant in the Weeping Peninsula and buy some Lost Ashes of War that will allow us to duplicate the Royal Knight's Resolve in a little bit. From here we're going to head up to Liurnia. We're going to grab the Dex Knot Crystal tier for 10 more dexterity, and then while we're here we're going to farm 2 of the curved great clubs. And then we're going to stop and grab a non-mandatory item called the Frenzy Flame Stone. It's just a lazy way to proc madness. Then we're going to take the Abductor Virgin Warp from the bottom of the Academy over to Volcano Manor to get Royal Knight's Resolve. As of patch 1.07, there's still a Godskin skip there, although it is a little bit tricky. However, once you get it, you have access to Royal Knight's Resolve, Serpent Hunter Spear, and an easy Black Dumpling farm, which we're going to need for this run. Make sure you open the shortcut and grab the Manor Site of Grace before heading over to Altus Plateau. Grab the Raptor's Black Feathers for 10% more jump attack damage. Then head over and grab the Smithing Stone Miner's Bell Bearing 2. Grab a perfume bottle for the Blood Boil and the Haima Glintstone Crown. Up in the Shaded Castle, grab the cookbook so you can craft blood boils for 30% more physical damage. Then we're going to use my zip glitch over the mountaintops. If you're not quite sure how this works, go check out my standalone video. It's called Mountaintops of the Giants Early Skip. Basically, you're going to zip across to the Forbidden Lands and then wrong warp to the top of the Grand Lift of Rold. This gives us access to the Smithing Stone Miner's Bell Bearing 3 and unlimited plus 18 weapons, which means we're ready to go start one-shotting bosses. Now when it comes to pre-buffing for these bosses, I'm going to show the first pre-buff routine, but then I'm going to be removing them for the rest of the video. Except for special cases where we do it inside of the boss fight. I just feel like it gets a little monotonous for you guys to watch the same 60-second pre-buff routine for an 8-second kill. If you're interested in the buff routines, I'm going to be posting standalone videos on all the major bosses, and the buff routines will be in those videos. You can also check out the video where I break down the math on how the buffs work. So now after defeating this boss, we have the first 3 Smithing Stone Miner's Bell Bearings and access to take any weapon to plus 18. So with the Crystallian down, it's time to set our sights on Margit. Margit is a great enemy that's required to progress to Godric and rewards us with a Talisman Pouch. He has almost 4200 HP and is weak to slash and multiple elements. He's fairly easy to one-shot with melee, but I want to spice it up and take advantage of his weakness to lightning, and show off the Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike at level 1. With Margit comes the incantation half of the build shopping list. We're going to start in Weeping with the Faith Knot Crystal tier for an additional 10 Faith, and then grab the Flame of Frenzy for an additional way to proc madness on our Black Dumpling. Then we're going to use the Transporter chest in the Tower of Return to pull off the Royal Capital Wrong Warp. I'll have a link in the description how to pull this off. I actually came up with this back in March as a way to access the Gravelstone Seal early in that first one-shot challenge. So be sure to grab at least one Site of Grace in the capital, then head out to the capital outskirts and grab the Golden Order Seal. You're going to grab this Imped Helm that gives you plus 2 Faith, and defeat this Knight for the Gravelstone Seal. It's a convenient offhand that gives our ADLS an additional 15% damage. From here we're going to use the 4 Belfries for the Wrong Warp to the Crumbling Farm Azula. I'll have a link on how to do this as well below, but it's pretty simple. It's in a lot of my early game guides. It's just a matter of using that Waygate, traveling to the Round Table, and then quitting out at the right time. If you do it correctly, it gives us access to important things like the Ancient Dragon Prayer Book for ADLS, the Somberstone Miner's Bell Bearing 4, and a Somber Smithing Stone 9. which we'll need to upgrade our Golden Order seal. Now we're going to head back to the mountaintops of the Giants and grab Seppuku for pre-buffing, the Somberstone Miner's Bell Bearing 3, so we now have access to unlimited 5, 6, 7, and 8s, and then we're going to do a skip down to the Consecrated Snowfield. Now this just requires jumping down in a certain part of the map, and I'll have a link on how to do this in the description as well. Then we're going to take the Waygate over to Mogwin's Palace. If the invader guarding the Waygate gives you a hard time, just run till they despawn. Then we're going to grab the White Mask for the 20% damage bonus to our pre-buffing routine. From here we're heading over to Mount Gelmir to grab a couple things. We're going to start off with the Golden Vow Incantation, which is a 15% damage bonus, and the Lightning Scorpion Charm, which is a 20% lightning damage bonus. We're going to finish off in Larnia. We're going to grab the Two-Finger Heirloom Talisman for an additional 5 faith, because we need all the stats we can get. Then we're going to head over to Muriel and turn in the Ancient Dragon's Prayer Book and buy Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike. Stop and grab the Intelligence Knot tier for 10 more intelligence, and then purchase any Somberstone 1 through 4 from EG that you might be missing, and any 5 through 8s from the Twin Maiden Husks with their new bell bearings. With the Somber 1 through 8s that you purchased plus the 9 that you picked up in Crumbling, you can upgrade your Golden Order seal to +9, and then go one-shot Margit with Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. Now with Margit down, we have another Talisman Pouch, which is one of the single biggest rewards that we can get early on. We need those Talisman slots, being this starved on stats. Speaking of the importance of stats, our next target's going to be Leonine Misbegotten. He's a great enemy that will drop the Grafted Blade Greatsword. The skill on this weapon will give you +5 to every stat. He only has 2200 HP, and he's weak to slashing fire. And though a fire melee weapon would be easiest, we're going to use lightning since part of his arena is in the water and will amplify the damage. So next on our list is actually going to be the Red Wolf of Radagon. He's a great enemy blocking progression to Renala, and also blocking access to the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown. He only has 2200 HP, so he should be pretty easy to kill with Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. We normally one-shot him with melee in our guide, so we're going to go ahead and hit him with ADLS this time. So we need a little more damage to one-shot Godric, so we're going to take a detour to the Kindred of Rot up in Mount Gelmir. The Kindred of Rot is actually a double boss, there's 2 of them. Each of them has about 3000 HP. They're extremely weak to physical and fire, but upon defeat they'll reward the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, which is a talisman we can add to our pre-buff routine that'll provide another 20% damage buff when we self-poison. We just have 3 things we need to grab first. We're going to go grab the Claw Talisman now that we have access to Stormville Castle. This gives us 15% more jump attack damage. Then we're going to head back over to the capital and farm a Duelist Great Axe. This is one of the highest raw damage weapons in the game. The last item is over in Caelid. It's the Flame Grant Me Strength Incantation, which provides 20% more physical and fire damage for 30 seconds. With the Kindred of Rot down, we can turn our attention to Godric. Godric's a big one because his Great Rune gives us +5 to all stats. So Godric is a demigod, and he's the first of 2 Great Runes we need to get a Talisman Pouch as well. He has a little over 6000 HP, and he's weak to physical damage. So we're going to smash him with a Fire Affinity Duelist Great Axe +24. This meant scouring the lands between for the open world available Smithing Stone 7s and 8s. Then we had to head to Limgrave to grab 3 key items. We needed the Nomadic Warrior's Cookbook 4 for fetid pots to self-poison, the Spike Crack tier for 15% damage bonus to charge attacks, and the Axe Talisman for 10% damage bonus to charge attacks. Then it was time to collect that 40 stat point reward.
I am the Lord of all that is golden. And one day...
Now with Godric's Great Rune, we have 15 to every stat as a baseline, 20 after using the Grafted Blade, 30 if we sprinkle in a Knot tier, plus gear and talismans. Now we're going to turn our attention to Esgar. He's a field boss, but he holds the Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman. We can add this to our pre-buff routine for a 20% damage bonus after proccing a self-bleed. Esgar has about 3500 HP with no real specific weakness. He's also accompanied by 2 dogs that will die instantly when he's killed. So we're just going to send it with the Duelist Great Axe again. Now that we have both the Lord of Bloods and Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, we can really start cranking out some damage. In order to reach the next boss we want to, we have to take care of the Mimic tier. This is a great enemy that will clone your character, including any weapons, armor, spells, and consumables that you're using. For me, he had around 4000 HP, with the general weakness to lightning. It should also be noted that we get the Silver Tier Mask, which is a reward that we will use later. In order to access Nokron this early, we're going to have to do another Rung Warp. This one's extremely simple and just requires another quit out. I will have a link in the description. If done correctly, it'll appear right at the boss arena. Now it's time to move on to another boss in Nokron called the Regal Ancestor Spirit. This is a legend, and the remembrance from this boss can be traded for the Winged Great Horn. This is an important piece of our arsenal because it can be used to debuff enemies so that they take 20% more damage. This boss has around 7000 HP and is weak to physical, fire, and holy damage. So we're going to stick with the Fire Affinity Duelist Great Axe. Now that we have the remembrance we were after, it's time to move on. Only 2 bosses left between us and Renala so we can get our second Great Rune and Talisman pouch. The first of which is Queen Gillica. This is a field boss with about 3500 HP. She's located in the Lux Ruins in the Altus Plateau, and is weak to physical and fire damage. We're going to be targeting that fire weakness with the Flame Stance from the Sword of Night and Flame. Killing this boss grants us access to a chest with the Ritual Sword Talisman, a talisman that gives a 10% damage bonus on full HP. First we need to grab a couple things. Over in Liurnia we need to grab the Howl of Shabriri. This incantation provides a 25% damage bonus to our buff routine. Then we're going to head over to the Carrion Manor and grab the Sword of Night and Flame and upgrade it to +9 at the Blacksmith. Just remember with the bells that you can now purchase those Somber Stones. Then we're going to swing by the Redmane Castle in Caelid to grab the Star Scourge Heirloom Talisman, which provides an additional +5 to Strength. Then we're going to head down to the Siofa River, grab the Marika's Scar Seal. This talisman raises Mind, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane by 3. Then we're going to head all the way up to Mount Gelmir and grab the Fire Scorpion Charm Talisman for a 20% bonus to fire damage. Now we should be ready to easily one-shot Gillica. Don't forget to grab that Ritual Sword Talisman for the 10% damage bonus on full health. Now it's time to go get that talisman's big brother from the Deathbird in Scenic Isle. This is a field boss with about 5600 HP, with weaknesses to strike and holy damage. We're going to use our Fire Duelist Great Axe again, and aim for a headshot, which is a 50% damage bonus. This boss will drop the Red Feathered Branch Sword Talisman, which provides a 20% damage buff while below 20% health. Now we can supplement this into our pre-buff routine to replace the Ritual Sword Talisman for a further 10% damage. Now it's finally time to take care of Renala. Renala is a legend that awards us our second Great Rune, which will allow us to receive another desperately needed talisman pouch. Renala is extremely weak to all physical damage, and she has 2 phases with separate health bars. About 3500 HP in phase 1 and just over 4000 in phase 2. We're going to target that physical weakness with the Heavy Duelist Great Axe. There's only one item we need to go get first. We need the Iron Wet Blade. This will grant us the heavy affinity on our Duelist Great Axe and allow us to do a ton of physical damage.
Little Rani, my dear.
We won't be using this Great Rune, but we needed it anyways. Just acquiring the second Great Rune is enough to get us another talisman pouch. This is a big damage increase for us. Now en route to some capital stuff, we're going to stop and kill the Deathbird in the capital outskirts. This is a field boss with almost 8600 HP that's weak to strike and holy. This boss drops a shield called the Twinbird Kite Shield that provides a 5% damage buff while your HP is below 20%. We're going to be targeting that holy weakness with the Holy Duelist Great Axe and a headshot. But first, for access to the Holy Affinity, we need to grab the Sanctified Wet Blade in the Fortified Manor in the capital. Also bear in mind that while on low health, this shield will stack with the red feathered branchsword talisman. Now it's time to head over to Commander O'Neill and Kaled for one of the best buff items in the game. This great enemy drops the Commander Standard. This is a weapon with a skill that provides 20% more damage for 30 seconds to all damage types. A lot of people resort to cheesing him with the geysers because he has a staggering 9200 HP. But that's not a one-shot. I want to see if I can one-shot him. So we're going to send it with everything we have. That means trading in the remembrance of the regal ancestor for the winged greathorn and using every buff that we have available to us. This is going to allow us to take our buff routine and damage to the next level and go take care of a very special boss. Here we're going to take a detour and go back to Crumbling Farm Azula for the Godskin Duo. This is a double boss, but they share an HP bar with a staggering 26,350 HP. However, they are weak to all physical damage except strike. So we're putting our Heavy Duelist Great Axe to the ultimate test. And they give us our final Smithing Stone Miner's Bell Bearing, allowing us to take any weapon to plus 24. First we need to stop back in Limgrave for the Fervor's Cookbook 1 to craft sleep pots. Then we're going to go to Laernia and one-shot Vike for the Vike's War Spear. Now this part's not mandatory, this is just another way to build up Frenzy, similar to the Flame of Frenzy. This is a good boss to actually teach the physical buff routine. So we always start with our Flask because it lasts 3 minutes, then Oath of Vengeance from the Grafted Blade Greatsword for that 60-second stat buff. Then you want to switch to your Winged Greathorn, equip the Vike's War Spear, and start the fight. I find it's easiest to funnel them into this little corner on the right, and start throwing your sleep pots over there. The trick is to just bait them both into the sleep pot. You also want them both fairly close together. Now as soon as you see that they're both going to be asleep, you need to quickly start building up your madness. Remember, Black Dumpling lasts a full 60 seconds, so that's the buff we're going to start with. The other longer buffs that last 60 seconds would be Blood Boil and the Grafted Blade Greatsword's Oath of Vengeance. So this buff routine is all about going in order of importance for the length of the buff. So after proccing your Black Dumpling, you want to go ahead and use a mana, and then use your Blood Boil. Then you're going to switch to your White Mask and your Commander Standard, and immediately use the Rallying Standard skill. Then you want to switch to your Winged Greathorn, and quickly run up to them and use Soul Stifler. This will last in the area for about 20 seconds, but the debuff will last on them for about an additional 10 seconds. At this point you're going to use a Fetid Pot to proc Self-Poison and Seppuku to proc Self-Bleed. This is for the damage bonus from the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation and Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Then you switch those two to the Red Feather Branchsword and Axe Talismans. Be sure that you have your Twin Bird Kite Shield on and send it. Now we have unlimited access to Smithing Stones 7 and 8 to take any weapon to plus 24 and add some variety to this run. Speaking of variety, we're going to go kill the Scaly Misbegotten next, that some of you might remember from that secret level 1 one-shot build guide. It's the Rusted Anchor. This weapon falls into the Great Axe class, so it does a lot of physical damage. However, it only does pierce damage. This is important because counterattack damage is exclusive to pierce damage. And this is when you do damage to an enemy during one of their attacks. This provides you an inherent 30% damage bonus, which can be increased even further with the Spear Talisman, which provides an additional 15% counterattack damage. This boss is weak to pretty much everything and only has 1300 HP, so we're just going to smash him with the Heavy Duelist Great Axe. So now we have the highest pierce damage weapon in the game. We'll be putting that to use here very shortly. So for now we've got our sights set on the Golden Shade Godfrey, who's both blocking our progression to Morgott and holding our final talisman pouch. He's a great enemy with around 7100 HP that's weak to pierce and lightning damage. So with all of our Smithing Bell bearings, we're actually going to go and get his Zweihander and take it to plus 24 and make it heavy affinity for a little bit of style on this kill. We can actually just purchase this weapon from a merchant down at the bottom of Weeping Peninsula, and then head over to Laernia and grab the Spear Talisman for that extra 15% damage bonus on counterattacks. Timing that counter can be a little bit rough, but it's totally worth it for that talisman pouch. Now it's time to go one-shot Morgott and propel ourselves towards the endgame bosses. This is a demigod that's blocking our progression. Morgott's weak to all physical damage, magic, lightning, and then fire damage in phase 1 only. However, even with the weaknesses, Morgott has over 10,000 HP, so we're going to have to be creative with how we take this boss down. We're going to need a couple things. We're going to start in Liurnia with the Jellyfish Shield. The shield gives a 20% damage bonus for 30 seconds with a skill called Contagious Fury. Then we're going to head up to Altus Plateau and grab a couple more perfume bottles and the Perfumer's Cookbook 1. This lets us craft uplifting aromatics, which give us a 90% damage negation bubble and prevent us from getting killed. And the final piece of this puzzle is going to be the neutralizing boluses in order to prevent our self-poison from killing us. Then we're going to head to the blacksmith and upgrade our rusted anchor to plus 24 and pray that that counter damage is enough. After that major milestone, we can start turning our eyes towards the fire giant. Up first is Royal Knight Loretta. She's a great enemy with about 4200 HP and a weakness to lightning. She's blocking our progression to Rani and Saluvis, so we're just going to take her out really quick with the Heavy Duelist Great Axe. So at this point we're heading down to Caelid to kill Radagon. This is only to progress Alexander's questline. He's a demigod in Redmane Castle with almost 9600 HP. He is weak to pierce damage, so we're going to go ahead and hit him with a counter as well. Instead of the Rusted Anchor, we're going to use the Zweihander for the extreme range that it provides. This fight's a bit tricky. You actually have to come through the Waygate, run away at the beginning to do most of your buff routine, and then come finish it off after aggroing him. So you basically just do everything except your bleed and poison buffs, and do those while he's on the way to you. With Radagon out of the way, we're actually going to do the Bloodhound Knight, which is a pretty simple earlier game boss, but he's blocking the progression of Latenna's questline in order to get her Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone. He has just under 1000 HP and a weakness to lightning, so we'll just do a condensed version of our pre-buff routine with a Lightning Duelist Great Axe. Now there's 3 bosses left with things we need for the fire giant, the first of which is the Crystallian Duo. They're in the Academy Crystal Cave, preventing us from getting Terra Magica. This is a spell we're going to use later on that provides a 35% damage bonus. This fight includes 2 bosses with individual HP bars. Each one has about 1684 HP. They're both weak to strike like the other Crystallian. Before this fight, we're going over to the Altus Plateau to one-shot the tree spirit that's guarding a carriage. And then we're going to pick up the giant crusher that's in that carriage. This is the highest damage strike weapon in the entire game. Upgrade it to plus 24 and then it's time to smash. Don't forget to head up the elevator behind the boss and grab Terra Magica. Now we're going to be heading back to the east side of Liurnia to the Erdtree Avatar. This is a field boss with about 4700 HP that's weak to strike and fire, so we're going to use the Fire Affinity Giant Crusher. Defeating this boss will award us with the Magic, Lightning, and Holy Shroud and Cracked Tears, each of which will provide a 20% damage bonus to their respective element. The 20% bonus damage to these elements is a big upgrade to our flask, and it's going to make a big difference in the late game trying to tackle some of these higher HP bosses. And speaking of higher HP bosses, up next is Godefroy. He's a field boss in the Golden Lineage Everjail, but he has over 12,400 HP. He is weak to physical, but we're going to take advantage of that new Lightning, Shroud, and Cracked Tear and hit him with the fully buffed Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. We need to kill him for the Godfrey Icon Talisman, which provides 15% bonus damage to charge spells and skills. For this boss, we need our first Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone from Latenna's questline that we progressed earlier. Then we need to head back to the Academy and grab that Twin Sage Glintstone Crown. The extra 6 intelligence it provides is going to be a big help on the scaling on our Golden Order Seal. We're also going to use that Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone to take our Golden Order Seal to plus 10 and check the damage. Godfrey icon should be the last boss-locked piece of equipment that we need. In theory, with a couple of items, we should now be able to one-shot the Fire Giant. The Fire Giant is a legend with over 43,000 HP. He's required for progression to Malekith, and he's weak to all physical, magic, and lightning damage. He takes 10% of his health as damage falling down at the beginning of phase 2, so we only need to hit him for 38,937. So the plan here is to use a Misericord plus 25 with the Carrion Grandeur Ash of War, and then tumble buff the Royal Knight's Resolve Ash of War onto it. If you're unfamiliar with tumble buffing, it's been in every Dark Souls game pretty much. It's pretty simple to pull off, and I'll put a link in the description below. So we know it can be done with the Shard of Alexander, but you can't legitimately get the Shard of Alexander without killing the Fire Giant. So that means I had to come up with another way, which led to me doing the unthinkable. But I'll get to that in a moment. First, we need to go back to Stormveil and get the Misericord. This is the highest crit damage weapon in the game, and it's capable of doing counterattacks. Next, we need to stop by the swamp in Caelid and grab the Meteorite Staff. It's very accessible, and it's the best low intelligence staff. Then we need to head over to the Carrion Manor and grab the Carrion Grandeur Ash of War. This hits like a truck. Then grab the Spellblade set for 2% more magic damage per piece. And then finally head over to Selûvus and get the Magic Scorpion Charm. This talisman gives us 20% more magic damage. Then we have to betray one of the coolest NPCs. While it's not the 15% bonus from the Shard of Alexander, the Warrior Jar Shard does boost the attack power of skills by 10%, so it should be enough to push our Carrion Grandeur over the top. The final piece of the puzzle for the Fire Giant was going to grab the Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone from right outside of his arena, and using it to upgrade the Misericord to plus 25, because Carrion Grandeur scales off of the weapon level. If you're curious about the buff routine for the Fire Giant, the standalone video is actually already out, but basically you're going to do your normal buff routine, ride up, put down Terra Magica, then you're going to ride back and proc your poison and bleed buffs. This all has to be done extremely fast, including switching the talismans to the Red Feather Branch Sword and the Magic Scorpion Charm, and then do the tumble buff glitch that we talked about earlier. At this point you need to get back up into your Terra Magica circle as quickly as possible and start charging your Carrion Grandeur. The goal is to have him leaning over you and hit the sweet spot. If you do it correctly, it should be a true one-shot, no second phase on the Fire Giant at level 1. Now it's time to move on and see if we can do the same thing to Malekith. Malekith is a legend with over 10,600 HP and no specific weaknesses. We need to kill him in order to progress towards the Elden Beast. We're going to pull a maneuver similar to what we just did on the Fire Giant with the Misericord, but the timing has to be perfect so we can kill him just before taking a fatal hit. Even though this is two bosses with a shared health bar, if we do this correctly, we should be able to outright one-shot this boss and skip phase 2 altogether. After doing most of our pre-buff and casting Terra Magica so that it overlays into the arena, we're going to finish off with the self-poison, talisman swap, tumble buff, and try to time this perfectly.
From me.
As you can see, the game's trying to figure out what to do because there's supposed to be a second phase in this boss fight. If you outright one-shot him in the first phase, you just give it a couple seconds and eventually the game will register that he's dead and give you the remembrance. With another major milestone down, it's time to head into the endgame. We're going to start off with the easiest of the endgame bosses, Sir Gideon. He's blocking our progression to the Godfrey Horaloo fight. He has about 6,200 HP and a weakness to lightning. So we're going to do a lightning affinity on the Duelist Great Axe and see if we can't one-shot him.
To become Elden Lord. What a sad state. I know in my
This was a pretty simple fight compared to some of the obstacles we just overcame. With him out of the way, now we can progress onto the Godfrey Horaloo fight. This is another legend and he's the last progression barricade between us and the Elden Beast. This fight actually contains two bosses with a shared health bar, but he has almost 22,000 HP. Horaloo is weak to all physical and all elemental damage except Holy, and after tons of testing, I found that he did in fact have a lot more resistant in phase 1 to all types of damage while he had the armor on. So we're going to attempt the same tumble buffed Carrion Grandeur that we used on Fire Giant and Malekith. Similar to Malekith, we're going to do most of our buffing outside the arena, but this time we're going to come inside to cast Terra Magica and do both our bleed and poison procs. We're going to try to push the damage a little bit further with the extra intelligence from the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown, and then just try to be ready by the time he reaches us. So after several attempts at the Elden Beast, I realized I needed a couple more things. So first we're going to go and see Elmer. He's a great enemy in the Shaded Castle. He's got almost 5,000 HP and he's weak to pierce and lightning damage. But we're just going to make life easy and smash him with the Heavy Giant Crusher. We need his weapon. It's called the Mari's Executioner Sword, and its weapon skill is a single attack that will hit multiple times in a corkscrew motion. The multi-hit weapon skill on this sword is going to be vital to taking down the Elden Beast later. But first we have a couple other bosses we need to take care of. The first of whom is the Godskin Apostle in Windmill Village. This is a field boss that we need to kill to progress Millicent's questline. Similar to the Godskin duo fight, he's weak to all physical damage except strike, and he only has about 7,400 HP. We're going to be taking advantage of that physical weakness with the Heavy Duelist Great Axe again. Next we're going to go attempt what I believe is the world's first ever glitchless level 1 one-shot of Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree. We need to take care of her to progress Millicent's questline, but she has almost 13,400 HP and a weakness to lightning. We're going to take advantage of that weakness to lightning with the Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. Now we're on to the Godskin Apostle in Caelid Tower, who I believe is the hardest part of this entire challenge. As I'll show in a few clips here in a second, not only does this boss have almost 14,400 HP, he has significantly higher resist to everything than all previous versions. He's blocking our path to the Godslayer's Greatsword, so we're going to need to find a way to take care of him. The same Heavy Duelist Great Axe that hit him for almost 14,000 damage in the Godskin duo fight barely did 6,600. So I started getting creative. I grabbed the Greatsword and I upgraded it to plus 24. To see if the insane AR on this weapon would help, and it barely did 8,000 damage. Allegedly this boss is weak to slash damage, so I spent an hour farming a Beastman's Cleaver, which is the highest AR slash damage weapon in the game, and upgraded to plus 24, and still couldn't even do 8,200 damage. So I decided to go back to my roots. So there you go, the world's first ever level 1 one-shot of the Caelid Apostle. That means we now have access to the Godslayer's Greatsword and the ability to go slay some gods. But first there's one last boss we need to go bully before heading to the Elden Beast. The Putrid Avatar in the Consecrated Snowfield holds the Thorny Cracked tier. This is a flask tier that makes consecutive attacks stronger by 9, then 13, then 20%. We're going to need this for the Elden Beast. This boss is extremely weak to fire, taking double damage from his negative 100 resistance. He's also weak to strike. That means our Fire Affinity Giant Crusher should make pretty short work of his almost 12,600 HP pool. There's just one item we have to go grab first. We need to head to the merchant in the Siofa River and buy the Nomadic Warrior's Cookbook 17 for oil pots. Hitting an enemy with an oil pot causes them to take 50% more fire damage. With our Thorny Cracked tier in hand, the only boss left is the Elden Beast. We've come a pretty long way, we just gotta figure out one more fight. This is actually 2 consecutive boss fights with separate health bars, one for Radagon and one for the Elden Beast. Radagon is weak to fire and has about 13,400 HP. The Elden Beast has no specific weaknesses and has over 22,000 HP. The goal here is going to be to move swap the Eochaid's Dancing Blade weapon art onto the Godslayer Greatsword. If done correctly, we should get those multiple corkscrew hits, but with the Godslayer's Greatsword damage. In order to pull this off, we're going to have to grab a couple things. We need the Uji Katana from the Death Touch Catacombs in Limgrave. You have to be offhanding this weapon to perform the move swap glitch. Then we need to head back to Crumbling Farm Azula. We're going to pick up a Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone and the Somber Stone Miner's Bell Bearing 5. This provides unlimited Somber Smithing Stone 9s. Then we're going to head over to the Haligtree, and unfortunately we have to pull a really scummy move and invade Millicent. This is because we need Millicent's prosthesis for the extra 5 dexterity and the boost to successive attack power, 4, 6, then 11%. While we're here, we're going to grab one more Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone. Then we're going to upgrade the Godslayer's Greatsword to plus 10, and we're going to raise the Mari's Executioner Sword to plus 10 as well. Now let's see the damage. It It turned out to be very tough to get in the right position to get enough hits to kill the Elden Beast, and I wasn't sure if the problem was that I wasn't doing enough damage or if I just wasn't connecting with all the hits. As you can see, we got pretty painfully close to a one-shot a couple times. Like, really painful. I thought that 5% difference from the Shard of Alexander was going to kill my run, but then I had an idea. I thought the boost in damage from the Spellblade set might actually translate to the Mary's Executioner sword on the move swap. So here's how that run went. I started off with a Frenzy Flamestone to start building madness for my Black Dumpling Helm, and while I waited I drank my flask, which gradually recovers FP, which negates the need for a Cerulean tier flask and saves a little bit of time. Then I used my Blood Boil, and I did this just before proccing the madness on my Black Dumpling Helm so the 60-second timer would line up pretty well from them. Then we used the Rallying Standard for that 30-second buff and immediately threw a Fetid Pot. This procced our Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, then we cured the poison with a neutralizing bolus, and used Seppuku to proc our Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Then I used the Oath of Vengeance on the Grafted Blade Greatsword because I thought the additional 5 stats would help push our damage over the edge. At this point, while entering the boss fight, I quickly switched to my Silver Tear Mask for the extra 8 arcane I needed to use the Mary's Executioner sword, and then switched to my Millicent's Prosthesis. Radagon's pretty straightforward, we just run at him and move swap and it should one-shot him pretty easily. At this point I both heal and proc my Kindred of Rot's Exaltation with a Raw Meat Dumpling and switch to my Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Then I use Seppuku really quickly to proc my Lord of Blood's Exaltation. As soon as we spawn into this phase, I use the Rallying Standard to reapply the buff that just expired. I make sure I'm two-handing the Uchigatana and switch back to the Warrior Jar Shard and perform another move swap. And that was it. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you smash that like button for us. And if you want to see more of my content, then when you sub, make sure you hit the bell icon. This will give you notifications whenever we throw out a new guide or a build. I'm actually on the tail end of another really cool challenge run for Elden Ring right now. And if you haven't seen it already, I definitely recommend you go and see our world first ever one-shot challenge from back in March, and the world's only level 1 one-shot challenge in Dark Souls. We really appreciate you guys sticking around this long, and we'll see you in the next one. Stay dangerous.